Hi everyone, welcome to the first lecture of the spring lecture series here at SCI-Arc. We're very happy to have with us tonight Jen Stark, who is an artist, which this should be a very interesting conversation or interesting discussion based on your work. I mean, the first time I saw Jen's work was actually in the thesis prep reviews where some SCI-Arc students had brought images of the work for their references for contemporary precedents. At the time, we were talking about the role of the algorithm. And I think it's fascinating to me the meticulous handcrafted work that Jen does, which we could, even looking at this image, we could think about the role of the algorithm, the kind of iterative series of rules that transforms over time. In Jen's case, astonishingly enough, hand cut, if I understand correctly. The first time I saw these, I was sure that there were laser cutters involved and things, so I was really impressed when I heard that this was all done by hand, which also, I think, raises the issue of the role of craft. I mean, there has been a big discussion recently here about digital craft and the role of analog processes and digital processes, and so I think this really contributes one side, it sort of opens up a facet of that discussion potentially for us tonight. Also the relationship between, in many of these pieces, the relationship between the flat two-dimensional sheet of paper, which conventionally as architects we draw on, so very familiar with, but that really transforming in this work into something completely three-dimensional with mass that starts to really take on a very different life through its stacking and accumulation. One of her pieces entitled "How to Become a Millionaire in 100 Days," which is a great title, points to a lot of these issues. I hope to show it tonight, and it also gained her international acclaim from that piece. So Jen Stark is based in Los Angeles. She was born in Miami, Florida. Received her BFA from the Maryland Institute College of Art in 2005, majoring in fibers with a minor in animation. I think there's also some animation work we might see tonight, which will be interesting in terms of the role of the analog stop frame animation. She studied at the Center for Art and Culture in Aix-en-Provence in France. Her work has been included in numerous group exhibitions, as well as several solo exhibitions. Jen has been the recipient of several awards, including the 2008 award for the South Florida Cultural Consortium's Visual and Media Arts Fellowship. She's represented by the Cooper Cole Gallery in Toronto, the Martha Otero Gallery in Los Angeles, and the Carol Hazara Gallery in Miami. So with that, I would like to welcome Jen to SCI-Arc. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you SCI-Arc for having me here, inviting me to come talk. I guess first off I'll just talk about growing up in Miami and the influence of all the plants and just like the layers of the tropical environment and how I think that affected a lot of my work. Much of my work it's very intricate, handmade paper sculptures that I cut with an X-Acto knife, and this is one of them. It's a detail. So each of the colors is actually a piece of paper that I hand cut and stack them, glue them together, just make these crazy sculptures. I've always been fascinated by the universal patterns that exist in all life, from tiny things like microscopic cells to coastlines, to massive shapes in the universe like the Milky Way. And a lot of my work has these themes running through it. So I'll talk about these ideas and its relation to my work. I'm in no way a mathematician or a scientist, so I just love these like visual representations of math, and you'll see that a lot in my work. So these are just some fun childhood drawings. I was always interested in art at a really early age. and interested in a lot of color and even collage and stuff. So those are some of those images. I went to college at MICA in Baltimore, and that was where I sort of started honing my craft, the whole like repetitive, intricate designs. And I really started honing it when I went to Aix-en-Provence, France. I studied abroad for a semester in college, and I urge everybody, if they want to study abroad, they should, because I think it really opens up your mind for a semester, and then you can, you just get to experience different things, and it's really awesome. So I went there, and I was a college student on a budget, and I decided to go to the art store to buy supplies, and I didn't have that much money, so I decided to purchase one of the cheapest materials I could find, and that was a stack of construction paper. So I took it back to my studio. It was probably like $1 worth. I took it back to the studio and just started cutting. And this cone sculpture is the first paper sculpture I created. It's pretty much like a Russian nesting doll effect. So the outer cone has the same cone inside of it, and then that cone inside of that. So they just keep getting smaller and smaller. And then I created Burst in 2007 that has kind of a similar effect with just making a simple cut, but through like accumulation and repetition, it becomes something unique and amazing. And then this is me just interested in like geometric designs and kind of the simplest forms and seeing where, like how I could transform it using paper. And I love using paper because it's such an everyday material that people are so used to, and it's kind of overlooked. And I just love the fact that I can just transform them into something amazing and like out of the ordinary. And I love the fact that it's a natural material. Like, it comes from the earth, it comes from trees, and so this is square, circle, and triangle. These are all just stacks of paper that I hand cut with the X-Acto and folded. And yeah, just a study in geometry. This is explosive expansion. It's a drawing that I made in 2009. And the drawings for me are like a way of just freeing my mind from the preciseness of the sculptures, because there's a lot of repetition and like pressing down on the X-Acto like in the same way over and over, that the drawings, I just lay down a piece of paper and start doodling. And there's like no ideas in the beginning. I just start, and then I start getting ideas as it goes along. So it's a lot more freeing for my mind, and then I jump between the two. So I was always interested in the patterns in nature. I noticed there was a similarity between these patterns no matter how large or small. I became obsessed with repetition. Many of my shapes seem to evolve and change layer after layer, kind of like the idea of evolution and how species can morph over generations. Also interested in the idea that every living thing shares a common thread and pattern, a sort of architecture that gives us all life, and how it relates to art and discovery. So this is another one of my paper sculptures, Chromatic Vortex. And this sort of has the pattern you see everywhere in nature inside of it, and just kind of emulating what I see. So many living things in nature have similar shapes: seashells, the tail of a seahorse, flowers, plants, spiraling wind of hurricanes, tornadoes, galaxies, even DNA in the veins of a human heart. So there's just this thing that it seems like it strings everything in nature together, and I'm really interested in how that all happens and why it's not, it is research, but we should really dive into it and research it even more. I think it's really interesting. So scientists don't know what holds the universe together. There's much more to life than we could perceive with our 5 senses. So there's an underlying current and pattern running through all shapes in the universe. Mathematical equations can help us understand the similarities in these patterns. How did this identical patterning come about, and how can it be so universal from the micro to the macro? So this is Pythagoras. He's one of the first revolutionaries of this concept in about 500 BC. He was a philosopher and a mathematician, and among his many discoveries, he revealed that harmonies and relationships in the universe could be given expression through numbers. So he was sort of the first of his kind the first one that was like, guys, there's numbers in these like natural shapes. It's not just air, water, fire, like all the other Greek philosophers thought that's what the essence of life was. So he thought the essence of life was number and pattern, and this was so abstract for the time. So this is the Fibonacci sequence. Other great visionaries discovered equations that were able to explain seemingly chaotic patterns in the cosmos. Things like the golden ratio, pi, and Fibonacci sequence reveal a pattern to chaos. The Fibonacci sequence is evident in many forms in nature, such as the branching of trees, the spirals of a pineapple, uncurling fern, and the arrangement of a pine cone. So the Fibonacci sequence works. It takes the number 1, and you add that with 1, and it becomes 2. And then you take the last 2 numbers and add it becomes 3. And then you take those numbers. So all of these numbers, you find, like, you can keep adding it to infinity. You find them throughout nature in like very weird locations, like the spiral of a seashell. It starts in the center, and then it sort of, this is the size of the square 13. It all sort of makes sense with the Fibonacci patterning. And this is an example of how it can be in tree branch growth, and how it, like, everything eerily has these numbers inside of it. And I think that's really amazing. And just like the pineapple and pine cones, you see the spirals in the pineapple. There's like a certain number, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like they all make sense if you add them up together in nature. And this is one of my paper sculptures, Centrifugal, which sort of takes on that idea of tornadoes and hurricanes and just this spiral effect that seems to be in lots of things. This is the Fibonacci number. This is just a flower that shows how the spirals match up with the sequence. Another one of my sculptures, the speed of light. And this one I coincidentally decided to do it in a rainbow gradient. And as I was creating it, I didn't realize these colors would match up. So that's kind of like a happy mistake that happened. And this is sort of like the Fibonacci pattern. So you see it everywhere. Here's a little just animation that shows more visually about this sequence. Whoops. And I just found this on the internet by Cristobal Villa. So this is talking about pi and how like all of these equations somehow show up in nature. So as you can see, there's just a lot of similarities everywhere you look. So getting back to my work, this is a paper sculpture inside of a wall. It's called Piece of an Infinite Whole. And I just wanted to express all the mystery in science and like everywhere in the universe, and sort of create this wormhole into another dimension. This piece is called Tunnel Vision. I did it in 2009. And it's a wood sculpture that inside of it I mounted a kaleidoscope. So it's like a rotating kaleidoscope. I'll show a video of it after. And I hand painted it to sort of give you the impression that you should look inside of it. And this is the, whoops. That's what you see when you look inside of it. It's a drawing that I mounted on a disco ball motor, and it has like a kaleidoscope mirror looking into it. And this sort of gives like a fractal, like infinite effect, and it's sort of like never ending. This piece is called Radial Reverie. It's sort of a similar pattern to the first ones you saw. It's a stack of paper that I hand cut with an X-Acto and folded them down. Except I wanted to give it sort of a like a vibrating effect to your eyes, so all the zigzags and just playing off those ideas. This is called Reciprocal. So I took essentially two pieces, so like the blue sculpture and the red sculpture, and I put them pretty much together. And it sort of shows the shape of, the sunflower, the seahorse, all those different kinds of things. And in my work, it's just emulating it. It's not like, scientifically correct or anything. It's just one part of my work that I wanted to share with you guys. This is kaleidoscopic, and again, the element of surprise, you come up to it and look into it, and there's a collage that I mounted to a motor, and it just keeps infinitely spinning. And I mounted a light inside of it so it would illuminate it. And I love the idea of the kaleidoscope and just things kind of never ending and those sorts of ideas. This piece I just did last year. It was shown in Toronto. It's called Cosmic Complex. And with the pedestal pieces, from far away you sort of just see like a freestanding pedestal, and you're not sure what's going on. And as you walk up to it, you see there's something inside of it. And I put the drips coming down it just so it would sort of make you come and look at it. And typically pedestals are meant to display objects, so something usually sits on top of them. But I wanted to, mess with the idea of the pedestal and what does that mean, and just doing the complete opposite and putting something inside of it that's unexpected. And this is all paper sculpture again on the inside. And the outside is all made of wood and a little bit of acrylic paint. Another drawing, high on constellation. And to me, these are sort of like chaos in outer space, like gaseous clouds. There's like just elements of like microscopic patterns and stuff. It's all abstract, but those are the ideas that I think about. This piece is sunken sediment. It's a sculpture inside of a wall. So I created the paper sculpture and pretty much cut a hole out of a wall and mounted it in there. So when you walk up to it, it looks like this wormhole that's sunken inside of the wall. This one's called Over and Out. And I just took the rainbow pattern that you see in a lot of my work, purple, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and then I flip it. Purple, orange, yellow, green, blue. And just like messing with colors and how they react to each other and contrasting colors, just that kind of study. So these are examples of fractal patterns in nature. In mathematics, a self-similar object is exactly or approximately similar to a part of itself. Many objects in the real world, such as coastlines, are statistically self-similar, so their statistical properties at many scales. For example, the head of a Romanesco broccoli is self-similar because each whorl looks like a tiny copy of the entire broccoli head. So that little whorl sort of looks like the whole. And within each small whorl, you'll see like it just keeps going and going and going, like the fractal designs. And fractal simply means that the same basic pattern is repeated on all scales. Fractals are commonplace in nature, and they're particularly visible in organic growth and crystalline forms. And I want to show you the amazing side of sculptures, apart from the cliche psychedelic computer graphic images you see everywhere. And this is an example of one of the computer generated. These are more fractal patterns in nature, the snail shell, the Milky Way, and the bee's hive. So the Koch snowflake is a mathematical curve and one of the earliest fractal curves to have been described. It's based on the Koch curve created by the Swedish mathematician Helge von Koch. So it just takes the simple shape of the triangle and repeats it again, and then repeats it again, and then it just keeps going into infinity. And then this is sort of an animation, kind of pixelated, but you get the idea of it just going into infinity, and it never ends. The first fractal shapes were drawn by Robert Brooks and Peter Madelsky in 1978. And then in 1980, Benoit Mandelbrot was able to define the algorithm and actually give numbers to it. So this was one of the very first. The Mandelbrot set is one of the most famous examples of mathematical visualization. For Mandelbrot, it's not about equations. It's about how do we explain this visual phenomenon. No matter how closely you zoom in, the pattern stays the same. Fractals are infinite and cannot yet be measured. With the help of a computer, Mandelbrot was finally able to visualize fractals and help him study them. People could finally see shapes that were formerly invisible. So fractals, like computers really helped fractals to come into existence because it's almost impossible for us to dive deep down into one and like really explore it. You can only, like with art, you can usually just do it on like a two-dimensional plane. And this is, whoopsie daisy. This is another animation kind of diving into the the shape of the fractal. And you see the shapes, they just keep repeating and repeating. And this shape is all over nature. You can just zoom infinitely into it, and there's no end. And this sort of makes me think of like flying through outer space, or like flying through a tiny organism. So that's just a little snippet of that. Here's some more animated examples of fractal growth. In the whole of mathematics, smoothness was everything. Mandelbrot opened up this roughness. There are so many shapes in the natural world that weren't seen this way. Now there's an order within the chaos. So why did it take until the 70s to discover this? Fractals have actually been around for hundreds of years, and artists have been putting them in their artwork, like without a way to express what they are, until the 70s when Mandelbrot came and actually put numbers to it and an equation to it. So many artists have observed fractals in the natural world. Here's another trippy fractal animation. So Salvador Dalí incorporated a fractal-like pattern in his painting Face of War in 1940. He created this painting during his stay in California, and it's about the concepts of the Spanish Civil War. So in this, you have the face as the whole, and then you have the similar faces inside of the mouth and the eye sockets, and then it just keeps repeating and repeating inside all the sockets. So kind of a crazy depiction. Salvador Dalí, he's amazing. So this suggests the self-similarity and infinite repetition. Another artist who was really familiar with fractal patterning was MC Escher. He used it in a lot of his work, and in this one called Smaller and Smaller. A lot of his reoccurring themes was his desire to represent infinity in his artwork. And with this one, we can see infinity in the center of the print. And then at the outside, he left room to add increasingly large lizards, so it could be tileable from the outside. But he was kind of unsatisfied with this and decided to do it sort of flipped the other way. So the outside is supposed to be the infinite part, and then it just, like, I guess it starts from here and then goes into infinity. A more modern artist called Alex Gray, he incorporates the fractal style of art, but he has like a spiritual sense with it as well. Much of his work has themes of self-similarity, infinity, and cosmic consciousness. So this one's called Collective Vision. And as you can see, it's just a bunch of faces and then eyes drifting into the infinity. And I thought it was interesting. I wanted to just juxtapose these. It's just a succulent, an example of the Fibonacci spiral again, going into infinity, and how artists, they just, have a desire to recreate this, and sometimes we don't even understand the equation or anything, but we understand it visually. Here's another painting by Alex Gray. It's called The Net of Being, and for me, the faces kind of represent past lives, and then, it just keeps going back and back into infinity. Fractals as the visualization of infinity frequently appear in religious and spiritual art as well. So this is an example of Islamic art, and it's related to complex mathematical patterns. Their religion prevents them from depicting the human form, so a lot of their artwork is geometric. Their art ties into the belief that the patterns of math and life are so beautiful that their architecture and tiles reflect that pattern. They define the infinite by creating a beautifully ordered, symmetric sculpture which repeats itself forever and ever. It also has an emphasis on God and his creations. The artist, his materials, and the product aren't important. The main objective is to praise God and his work. This is very different from modern day, where the artist and his art are the ones that are praised. So I thought that was interesting that even back in the day, like, they're still making fractal patterns in their art and not really realizing what it is, but seeing a connection in everything through it. And even in this Tibetan mandala, it's sort of just going into infinity. And then that brings me back to my work again, Counter Cosmo. Just taking these same ideas of the rainbow. And I use the rainbow a lot in my work because in nature, colors are meant as an attractant, something that like catches your eye from far away. So, and I just love the way they look and how the rainbows are in light, and you know, they're just amazing to me. So for this, I wanted to do the rainbow scheme, but also juxtapose it with like an opposite pattern, black and white, and sort of see what happens to your eyes and play with those ideas. This one's titled Pedestal. And again, this one's a very simple pedestal that when you're looking from far away, it just looks like blank. And you go up to it and discover this kind of wormhole, like fractal wormhole into another dimension. So this is the detail of pedestal, and that's what you see when you look inside of it. And I put a little light at the end just to bring another element of discovery and mystery. And I also recently started working with holographic paper, just interested in those properties and how they react with light. And for this one, it's called Holographic Circle. I chose a holographic paper that had sort of a plaid pattern on it. And when I cut them, I would line up those patterns inside of the hologram so that when the sculpture is put together, you see this sort of like sculptural holographic net inside of here. So I thought that was interesting, and I feel like holographic things, you know, I want to explore them more and figure out what they're all about. And this is a holographic square. It's just sort of like a starry looking holographic. And these are really interesting because as you move around them, the color and the lighting like moves with it. It's pretty trippy. This is an installation I did in LA at Martha Otero called Micros. And it's just playing with the idea of big and small and those scales. These forms are found a lot in my artwork, just simple geometric shapes. And just wanting to see how small I could physically make a paper sculpture. So these sculptures are actually 2 inches by 2 inches, and the little title placards next to them are pretty tiny. They're probably a few millimeters. Just wanted to play with the idea of scale, micro and macro, and the simple primary color scheme. This piece is titled Whole, and that was in the same show. So I think this one's maybe like 200 layers of paper. And this one we pretty much cut a hole out of the wall again. So you can walk up to it and sort of like look inside of it a little bit. In this one I chose a color scheme that would sort of fade gradually from the wall into the crazy psychedelic rainbow. And then again, it has the Fibonacci sort of spiral that I'm inspired by, and you see a lot in nature. Another sculpture, Cosmic Distortion. This one I did in 2012. And yeah, again, just the simple pedestal shape, but kind of taking it another step and making it have crazy points and kind of making it look almost dangerous. So this is a shot of me in the studio, and I'm actually wearing the same outfit. I just realized that. This was, I'll show you the image for it after. But so between each layer, I usually do like foam core, and I space them out. All my materials that I use are all acid-free, because paper, after a while, they can become brittle and yellow and do crazy things if it's not archival. But like all the materials I use won't do that. They'll last forever, or hopefully they will. This is another holographic sculpture in the foreground, kind of fuzzy. This one, Vortextural, so that's the piece that I was working on. So you can see sort of behind the curtain how I create it. So it's actually one big sculpture that I glued together, and it's pretty heavy. It's probably 40 or 50 pounds. And then we mount it into the wall. So that's a close-up of it mounted. And again, the spiral. And along with sculptures and drawings, I do stop-motion animations. And I just love the fact, I guess all my work, I love just getting hands-on and not relying too much on a computer or just getting old school with it. I love stop-motion animation, the look of it, how simple it is. And I got a minor in animation when I was in college. So this is one of the animations I created in college, and it's all using paper. So that was sort of my first attempt at making stop motion with paper. And this next one is a more recent one. The musician Dan Deacon, he's from Baltimore. He's really cool because during his performances, he has the whole audience interact with each other, and it's like an awesome experience. So he asked me to create an animation on one of his songs, and he gave me a few choices, and I chose one that I felt matched my work the most. And it's sort of like meditative and kind of very flowy and loopy. So this is it. this one sort of seems like it's going through infinity, but then it stops and comes back, and it just loops back and forth, and it's kind of like an infinite animation. Just keeps bouncing from the beginning to the ending. And that was the beginning. So I feel like there's a sort of mystery in all these shapes in nature and these crazy equations, and just trying to like explore this more and see if I can, you know, discover something new about it or show people how beautiful it is. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys so much.